Well, hello everyone. It is so nice to talk to you on this beautiful September day. I've been whipping through books. Like a lot of the books I've been reading have been in 1 or 2 days, so this is going to be a little crazy. And I am tackling those 42 books that I have declared that I will be reading this autumn. Let's start with The Farmer's Wife. This almost made it to my list, by the way, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to read this anyway. The author that wrote this, she talks about her experiences growing up with her mother being a farmer's wife, but then she also has her own experiences as a farmer's wife. So it was nice to get the perspective of growing up under that and how she felt about, she wanted to kind of get away from it, only to get right back into it. She talks a lot about motherhood. Her birth stories are talked about in this. I really liked this book. I liked her stories. She talked a lot about sustainable farming, but with having meat animals that are part of that. It was a side that I hadn't really heard about. I've heard a lot about the plant-based type of movement, and she gives this other explanation that I was like, that's an interesting take. So it made me respect what she does as a farmer's wife. She talked about what her relationship with her husband is like, how they met. She did have a lot of time jumps, so sometimes she would talk about all of her kids, but then other times it would be just one of her kids from when they were little, and you kind of had to figure that out as she would go from the past to the present, and it was kind of all over the place with the time, but I was able to follow it well, which is kind of surprising because sometimes that boggles my mind. But this was kind of simple. So it was a lovely tale. Now, there was a lot of rawness in it. So she has, like, for instance, an argument with her husband. They both say the F word a few times. So I'd say about 5 or 6 times the F word is used in this, and 1 time the S word. They do smoke marijuana at one point when she's in college, and there's some drinking. So that's your content. The story outside of that, I gained a lot of wisdom and knowledge from what her experiences are like. And as someone that is a wife and a mother, I could relate in different forms for what maybe that is like for me. So I enjoyed it. Secret of the Old Clock. This is a Nancy Drew story. Yes, this is a different cover than what I had shown on my 42 books because that's what my library had, was this one. So this is very wholesome, very cute. If you don't know about Nancy Drew, these were books written in the 30s. This one is 1930. This book starts out where she kind of almost hits this little girl with her car. She starts talking to these 2 women who are her caretakers, and they are her great aunts. People open up to her, and she finds out there is this one man that has left a will, and how it would be very helpful for them. It's their brother, the 2 women that she's talking to. Their brother died, and they didn't get anything in the will, and they were very surprised because he had promised them something, but he had lived temporarily with this one family. They got everything. So they think there's another will. So this actually should not be called The Secret of the Old Clock. It should be called The Search for the Lost Will. But there is an old clock in this, and I feel like the title kind of gives it away. But it is a very cute story. She has a good relationship with her father, who's a lawyer, and she's kind of helping him with investigations, and he kind of lets her go out on her own to do that. She's 18 years old. She has a car that he just bought her. They have money. Her mother died at one point when she was young. So all over the place, she is trying to find this will, and she keeps getting story after story from different relatives of maybe where it is. She gets herself into some dangerous situations, and thankfully her father does have some care for that at one point and says, hey, I don't like that you kind of put yourself out there when you could have gotten really severely hurt. I enjoyed it. As the only Nancy Drew book that I have read so far, it was very nice to finally get into this. I had a fun time. Another book that I had been wanting to read is 10 Mile. I didn't really know what this was going to be, except for I thought maybe it had something to do with frontier living or pioneer life of some sort. Just based off of the cover, I didn't really know anything else, but it looked like it would be cute. This is a middle grade book, but I will say there's a lot of major sad things that go on in this book that was really something that I felt was too grievous, even for me. I was like, there's just so much sadness in this story. It shows you, though, what life would be like for someone that lives near a small town in the mountains where people are mining, and what that mining town would be like, where they have this area called the Chicken Flats where these poor people live there. Now, the main character, her name is Sissy, and she works for her father, but she also goes to school. She's about 13, 14 years old, and her dad is the only doctor in town, so he's all over the place, but he's taught his daughter everything that he knows. Sissy has these 2 friends, but they definitely are going through some hardships, and it's just kind of heartbreaking when you learn her friends' stories. But anyway, she is trying to figure out if she wants to leave 10 Mile, which is the name of the town, or if she wants to stay there as she gets older. So it's a little bit of a finding herself situation, but also her caring for the people in the town. Something that was kind of questionable to me. One of her friends has this dad, and the dad is like saying things like, oh, you're so pretty. You're a pretty little thing. Like, she's this young girl and he's constantly complimenting her looks and like, you're going to make a great wife one day. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. This man is always making a point about her looks. Throughout this book, there's talk about drinking, men that are getting drunk, people that are abusive to their children. It's just very depressing, a lot of these stories. So I feel like if you're going to read this book, be prepared for a sad story. It's not very happy. I had really been looking forward to this book all year long. Once a Queen, this is a fantasy story. I know I don't read a lot of fantasy, but this was very enjoyable. It did have a lot of story that was being built. So you have this young girl. She's like 14 years old. Her name is Eva. She has never met her grandmother, and they're going to visit her in England. They live in Connecticut. She's going with her mother. Her dad's staying behind because he has a lot of work that he's doing. Her parents have a good relationship. And when she goes to see her grandmother, she wants to get to know her, but her mom's kind of like, don't badger her with questions. Her mom has a reason that she hadn't been talking to her own mother for a while. But while there, Eva, she starts to see a lot of things that are a little suspicious. Now, she grew up with this fairy tale that she adored, and it's a made-up fairy tale for this book, but she talks about other well-known fairy tales and what they had meant to her. It was pretty fascinating to hear her talk about some of her favorites. And they were all ones that I had either heard of or some that I was like, I need to read that. But the point is, for Once a Queen, she finds out that there is a land that exists where her grandmother lives that is from one of her storybooks. She starts seeing things on the grounds of where she lives. And she wants to explore these things, but no one is telling her anything. She makes a friend while she's there, and his family has worked there for a while. Now, a lot of people call her grandmother Your Majesty. So she's like trying to piece things together. Now, her own father has been trying to piece something together too, and that's part of his work. She wants to uncover the story of her grandmother. Even though it was a little bit slow at times, the story was very nice, and I got through this pretty quickly. And there is a sequel that I hope to read, and then there's another one that just came out, or it's about to come out. Now, this other land, this other realm, this other world, I wish there was a little bit more in that area, but I think there was a reason why we didn't go in there that much, because it was more of trying to figure out life outside than inside. Yeah, it's pretty cover too. The Year of Miss Agnes, also a different cover than what I had shown originally. That's all I could get from when I thrifted this book. Miss Agnes, she is from England. She comes to this small town in Alaska. This is set in 1948, I believe. Now, I don't know exactly the name of the tribe of the people that live in this Alaskan village, but they have had a new teacher every single year, and they don't really spend the time that they should with the students teaching them what they need to learn. And so she has methods of her own of how she's going to teach them. And with these methods, they really start to form bonds with her, and she learns a little bit about them as well. It's very short. I wish there was a lot more in this. The way it was written, there are some things that I was like, I don't like the sentence structure for a lot of things. The characters are really fun. It is good for, I think, elementary kids to read. Maybe if they're like 7 to 11, this is probably best for them. Now, one thing that kind of bothered me in this is that they would say, oh, when my grandmother speaks Indian, and I'm like, why didn't they say the name of the tribe? Why did they write Indian? Because Indian, I think of India. So that bothered me because this was written in like the 2000s, early 2000s. And I was like, really? You couldn't put, like, I would think the child, if he's from a certain tribe, would say the language for his tribe. So that was the only thing that really bugged me about this. The Man Who Died 7 Times. This is like one of the #1 books right now. And I am really glad that I read it. It was fascinating, actually. It had one of those things where you're in a time loop. So the main character, he is 16 years old. Throughout his life, starting at a certain point, he started to live out 9 days in a row of the same day, and it comes every once in a while. So he feels like even though he's 16, he's lived double his life if you count up all the times he's had to relive days. So he explains a little bit about what that's like. But he also starts this out where he's talking about his grandfather. His grandfather has this will, and he's going to leave his business and his company to one of the people in his family. Now, his mother and his aunt, those two have not talked to their grandfather like at all since high school. They really barely are a part of his life. They don't really care. He only knows bits and pieces about their lives. And then there's another one of his aunts that has been with him the whole time. She doesn't have a family. Her business is basically her family. So this kid, they all have to wear these tracksuits of different colors. And so he explores trying to find out what is going on in his day that he has to fix. Because there's something that goes on where his grandfather is murdered and he's dead. And he's like, who in my family killed my grandfather? So he goes through each of these days. I will say in the middle, it kind of dragged a slight, but throughout the rest of the book, I was very invested in this and I wanted to know more about what he had to switch throughout the day. And some things, it didn't turn out the way I thought. The ending was a little odd, but it also left it open for a sequel. So I'm curious about what the sequel will be like. Now, there is a lot of drinking in this, as well as teenage drinking. Language, I think there were a couple words. I definitely know there was a shorter B word that was said. While it is not completely clean because he overhears a couple making out and he doesn't know what else, and he explains the sounds that he hears. So you expect there to be something, although they don't have sex when he overhears it. There is something going on. That would be the only thing. It was very brief and it's not descriptive, and it's from a perspective of someone just listening in on trying to understand what's being said in between things. So those are the only issues content-wise that I have with this book. There is, in case this bothers you, there are talks of two cousins being in a relationship. I had to look up if this is appropriate in Japanese culture, and while it's allowed, it's not completely lifted up as okay. So I thought that was interesting because that might bother a lot of people that read this. I started the Canadian West series. I am going to take a little halt on it, but I was glad that I read the first two books. So I read When Calls the Heart and When Comes the Spring. Now, When Calls the Heart, this one is about Elizabeth. She goes into this one area because her brother, her older brother, talks about the need of a teacher in this part of Canada that maybe doesn't have a teacher. And so she goes because she has the education and she had been a teacher where she lives. You learn a little bit about her mom, her dad, her siblings, and then she goes off to this place to meet up with her brother. And while she's there, she sees this man that catches her eye. His name is Win. She learns that he is married, so she keeps her distance because she had been interested until she learned that. So it was very interesting to see what she went through. You don't get too much. I feel like this book didn't have a lot in it that would have liked you to feel connected to the couple. And I wanted that, but there was a lot. This is a Christian story, and I really liked the faith that's brought into this. I enjoyed the Christian part of this book a lot. When Comes the Spring, how do I talk about this without giving away the first book? Okay, so When Comes the Spring, Elizabeth is married now to someone. So it talks about her wedding, talks about her honeymoon. She is definitely so used to like being in more high society, but she does her best to give into the ways of her husband's lifestyle and trying to help give up her own comforts. So a lot of this book is about that. The first book, she does have a funny story about trying to deal with mice in where she lives. And she starts to connect with the people in that place. But now she's in a different place, up further north in Canada. And while she's there, she learns about some of the people that are from different tribes that are indigenous there. She has her reserves because she wants to talk to white women. And so that's kind of sad, but I think it makes sense for how a woman would have acted in that time who, you know, if a white woman goes to a place where there are no white women, she might be like, oh, but then she opens herself up to the people there and she makes friends and she learns about their culture a little bit. So I really liked this one too. It had a lot of faith as well, as she talks about when we sin, what sinfulness is like and how we all are with sin. I liked this book. And even though it says When Comes the Spring, spring is only at the very end of this book. It mainly deals with like autumn into winter. I was so glad that I was able to read all of these books so quickly and enjoy them for the most part. So now that I got through these, on to the next pile of books that I have ready for me to read. I've already started to work on a couple books that I am halfway through. Yeah, I'm having a great time getting through my list. As for my autumn reading bingo, I'm trying to think if any of these that I have talked about would fit that because I read all of these in September. I'm trying to think like this could have some creepy factors, but I don't really feel it's creepy enough. So I'll pass on that. There are definitely warm beverages in a few of these books. In Miss Agnes, she makes tea for 2 of her students, so I could do that. I mean, a few of these books have warm beverages. Atmospheric, I mean, Once a Queen could have some atmosphere. I think I'm gonna wait so it's like more autumn atmosphere. I feel like this wasn't. So yeah, I think I'm gonna skip out on filling out my bingo card with this group. On to the next group and we'll see if any will fit in it for that. Well, thank you so much for being here and have a great day. Bye.